Hello my friends, and welcome back. It is so good to have you here with me again tonight. We are about to embark on a journey to a place of immense silence, a place where history and geology are one and the same. Our story tonight begins with a legend, a single powerful image that has echoed through millennia, a bush that burned with fire but was not consumed. It's a story many of us know, a pivotal moment in the Abrahamic traditions where Moses is said to have encountered the divine on a remote mountain. But our purpose here is not to dissect scripture. Instead, we are going to do what we always do. We are going to look for the science, the deep and beautiful biology that might lie at the heart of such a profound story. We're going to search for the real burning bush. To do that, we must first understand the stage upon which this story is set, the mountain itself. As always, if you find some comfort or a bit of wonder in what we do here, I would be so grateful if you'd consider liking the video or subscribing to our quiet little community. It truly helps more than you know. And I'm always so curious, where in the world are you listening from tonight? It's a beautiful thought, all of us scattered across the globe, under different stars, but sharing this one quiet moment together. Let me know in the comments if you feel so inclined. Now though, it is time to let all of that go. Find that perfect spot on your pillow, let your shoulders relax, and feel the weight of the day begin to dissolve. Dim the lights if you haven't already. Close your eyes and take a slow, deep breath. We are leaving the noise of our world behind. Together we are going to travel across deserts of sand and time, to a place where the earth shows its age in magnificent sun-scorched stone. Let's begin our journey to the Mountain of God. Chapter 1. The Mountain of God. The Geology and Ecology of Horeb. To understand any living thing, whether it's a plant, an animal, or an entire ecosystem, we must first understand its home. We must learn the language of the landscape it inhabits, and the landscape of our story, the Sinai Peninsula, is one of the most ancient and eloquent on earth. It is a place that speaks in a vocabulary of stone and silence, of deep time and fierce sunlight. Imagine, if you will, that we are floating high above it. Below us lies a wedge of land, a triangle of desert connecting Africa and Asia. To the west is the Gulf of Suez, a long narrow finger of the sea. To the east, the Gulf of Aqaba, a darker, deeper rift. This peninsula is a land bridge, but it is also a place of separation, a great geological seam where continents are slowly, inexorably tearing themselves apart. This is where our story begins, not with a bush, not with a prophet, but with forces of an almost unimaginable scale. For hundreds of millions of years, this part of the world was part of a vast, stable block of primordial rock, known as the Arabian-Nubian Shield. Think of it as the foundational slab upon which much of North Africa and the Middle East was built. It was ancient, solid, and for eons, relatively quiet. But deep within the earth, the planet is never truly still. The great engine of plate tectonics is always at work, a slow, patient, and immensely powerful process. About 30 million years ago, which is quite recent in geological terms, this engine began to pull the African and Arabian plates apart. It was not a sudden, violent cataclysm, but a stretching, a thinning of the Earth's crust over millions of years, like a piece of dough being slowly pulled until it begins to tear. This tearing created what we now know as the Red Sea Rift. And as the crust thinned and cracked, something remarkable happened. The immense pressure from below was released, and the molten rock of the Earth's mantle, the magma, began to rise. It pushed upwards, seeking out weaknesses, filling vast subterranean chambers miles beneath the surface. This is the secret birth of the mountains of Sinai. They were not born in the way we often imagine, as jagged peaks thrown up by the violent collision of continents. They were born from below. They are intrusions, great bubbles of liquid rock that rose into the older crust and then, crucially, were allowed to cool. And the way they cooled is the key to their character. This was not the rapid, glassy cooling of lava erupting from a volcano into the open air. This magma cooled deep underground, insulated by miles of overlying rock. It was a cooling process that took millions upon millions of years. It was a slumber of stone, and in that slow, patient cooling, crystals had time to grow. Not microscopic crystals, but large, visible, interlocking grains of minerals. This is what defines granite. When you look closely at a piece of granite from this region, you are not looking at a homogeneous rock. You are looking at a mosaic of minerals, a frozen community of crystals that grew together in the dark. You can see the milky white of quartz, the dark flecks of mica and hornblende, and most importantly for our story, the beautiful pink and red hues of a mineral called potassium feldspar. This is what gives the mountains of southern Sinai their iconic, breathtaking color. At sunrise and sunset, they don't just reflect the light, they seem to glow from within, saturated with a deep, rosy, almost flesh-like warmth. The iron oxides locked within the feldspar crystals catch the light, turning the entire landscape into a canvas of reds, oranges, and deep purples. It is a geological blush, frozen in time. These are the mountains of red granite that form the heart of the Sinai, and among them, the peak that tradition calls Mount Horeb or Jebel Musa, the mountain of Moses. For millions of years, this newly formed granite lay hidden, buried deep within the earth. But the forces that created it were not finished. The continued stretching and rifting caused the entire region to lift, to dome upwards. And as the land rose, another patient and relentless force began its work, erosion. The wind and the rain. What little of it there is, are nature's great sculptors. Over countless millennia, they stripped away the softer overlying layers of sandstone and limestone, patiently, grain by grain. It was like the slow unwrapping of a precious gift. And what was revealed beneath was the hard, crystalline core of the mountains we see today. The granite, being more resistant to weathering, remained, standing proud and magnificent as the world eroded around it. So when we look upon these peaks, we are not seeing young new mountains, we are seeing the ancient exposed bones of the earth. We are looking into the heart of a long-extinct volcanic system, a world of magma chambers and intrusions that has been brought to the light. The journey of every single grain of sand on the floor of the Sinai desert began up high, as part of this solid, monumental rock. Let's descend now, from our vantage point high above, and walk among these giants of stone. The air here is thin and incredibly dry. The silence is profound. It's a silence so deep it feels like a presence, broken only by the whisper of the wind or the scuttling of a lizard. Underfoot, the ground is not soft soil, but a coarse, gritty substance called grus. It is weathered granite, the mountain itself slowly disintegrating under the relentless sun. Reach down and pick up a handful. You can see the individual crystals glinting in the light, the very same quartz, feldspar, and mica that make up the colossal peaks around you. This is not the dark, rich, loamy soil of a forest teeming with organic life. This is a mineral world. It is the raw material of geology, barely transformed into a medium for life. It holds little water and contains few nutrients. To grow here is an act of defiance. The primary sculptor of this landscape is the sun itself. In the desert, the temperature difference between day and night is extreme. During the day, the granite surfaces can become scorching hot, hot enough to burn your hand. The minerals within the rock expand in this heat. Then, as the sun sets, the temperature plummets. The clear, dry air cannot hold the day's warmth, and the rock radiates its heat back into the blackness of space. As it cools, it contracts. Day after day, century after century, millennium after millennium, this cycle repeats. Expand, contract. Expand, contract. It's a process called thermal stress weathering, or insulation. Imagine bending a piece of metal back and forth, over and over. Eventually it weakens and breaks. The same thing happens to the rock, but on a timescale almost too vast to comprehend. Microscopic cracks form and grow, connecting with one another. Eventually, sheets of rock, sometimes thin, sometimes meters thick, will peel away from the mountainside like the layers of an onion. This is called exfoliation, and you can see it everywhere. great curved domes of granite and piles of broken slabs at the base of cliffs, testaments to the quiet, irresistible power of the daily cycle of sun and shadow. The second great sculptor is the wind. The wind in the Sinai is a persistent artist, armed with an infinite supply of abrasive tools, sand. The grains of sand, picked up and carried by the wind, act like a constant, gentle sandblaster. For thousands of years, it scours the faces of the rocks. It smooths and polishes some surfaces until they gleam like polished stone. It finds softer spots, weaker minerals in the granite, and carves them out, creating hollows, arches, and fantastical shapes known as tophony. The rock faces are covered in these pits and lattices, giving them a honeycomb or Swiss cheese appearance. It is a testament to the fact that even the gentlest, most persistent force can wear down the mightiest of materials. And then there is the third and most dramatic sculptor, water. It may seem strange to speak of water in such an arid place, but its role is powerful precisely because it is so rare. Rain might not fall for years at a time. The sky remains a brilliant, cloudless blue. The land grows drier and drier. But when the rain does come, it often comes not as a gentle shower, but as a sudden, violent downpour. The dry, baked ground cannot absorb the water quickly enough. The sparse vegetation can do little to hold it back. And so the water gathers, forming torrents that rush down the steep, rocky slopes with incredible force. These are flash floods. For a few brief chaotic hours, the silent, dry canyons, the wadis, are transformed into raging rivers. These floods carry an immense load of sediment, sand, gravel, and even large boulders. The wadi becomes a liquid grinder, a powerful churning force that scours its channel, deepening and widening it with every flood. The sound is a deafening roar of water and grinding rock, a stark contrast to the usual profound silence. Then, almost as quickly as it began, it is over. The water soaks into the ground or evaporates in the intense heat, and the wadi returns to being a dry, silent riverbed of stone. But the evidence of its power is left behind, in the smoothed, sculpted canyon walls and the piles of debris. These wadis are the arteries of the desert. They are the paths that water has carved, and therefore, they are the paths that life will follow. In the deep sand and gravel of the wadi floor, the precious water from a flash flood can remain for months or even years, protected from the evaporative power of the sun. It is here, in these dry riverbeds, that you will find the highest concentration of life. Trees like the hardy acacia sink their deep taproots down to find this hidden moisture, creating ribbons of green that trace the path of ancient floods through the red, rocky landscape. This interplay of geology and climate creates a world of stark contrasts and hidden refuges. The mountain itself is not one single environment, but a mosaic of countless microclimates. A north-facing slope, which spends much of the day in shadow, is a world away from a south-facing slope that bakes in the direct sun all day. The shaded side is cooler, the rock surface less stressed, and any moisture that falls will linger just a little bit longer. In the deep, narrow cracks and fissures of the granite, temperatures remain more stable and water can be trapped. These tiny pockets, these shaded clefts and north-facing valleys become sanctuaries. They are called refugia. In these refugia, life can persist in ways that seem impossible just a few feet away out in the open sun. Ferns, mosses, and even flowering plants that have no business being in a desert can be found huddled in these sheltered spots. The mountain, which seems at first glance to be a uniform and hostile monolith of stone, is in fact a complex and varied apartment building, with countless nooks and crannies offering different living conditions. It is in one of these very special microclimates, in a particular kind of sanctuary, that we will eventually find the plant we are looking for. But long before we, or even Moses, came to this place with our questions, this landscape was already ancient and full of meaning to the people who moved through it. For thousands of years, Mount Horeb and the surrounding peaks were not primarily a destination for pilgrims but a landmark for travelers. Imagine you are part of a trade caravan. Thousands of years ago, you are moving precious cargo, frankincense and myrrh from the distant lands of Sheba, spices from the east, bound for the wealthy courts of Egypt. Your world is a sea of sand and gravel, a landscape that can be confusing and disorienting. Your survival depends on navigation, and in this world, the high peaks of the southern Sinai are your lighthouses. Their distinctive red color, catching the first and last light of the sun, makes them visible from enormous distances. They are fixed points in a shifting world, signposts carved by geology. The mountain was a map long before it was a holy site. It provided a sense of direction, of stability, of reliability. It was a silent stone guardian of the trade routes. And the region was not empty. People have lived in the Sinai for tens of thousands of years, but it also drew industry. For the ancient Egyptians, the Sinai was a source of great wealth, not of gold, but of copper and most famously turquoise. The mines at places like Serabit el-Khadim are some of the oldest in the world. For centuries, Egyptian expeditions would venture into this harsh landscape to extract these precious materials. And where people go, their beliefs follow. The Egyptian miners did not see the desert as an empty, godless place. They brought their gods with them, and also recognized new deities in the landscape itself. They built a temple to the goddess Hathor, whom they called the Lady of Turquoise. This temple, high on a plateau, shows that for thousands of years before the arrival of the Israelites, this region was already perceived as a place of spiritual power, a place where the human world could connect with the divine. It was a place worthy of worship. Even more ancient than the Egyptian temples are the countless pieces of archaeological evidence scattered throughout these mountains. Open-air cultic sites, mysterious stone circles, standing stones and small, simple altars have been found in the valleys and on the high plateaus. These were not the sites of organized, state-sponsored religion. They were likely the sacred places of nomadic peoples, the Semitic tribes who moved through this land with their flocks. They left behind no grand temples or written texts to explain their beliefs. Their worship was elemental. They worshipped in the presence of the mountain itself. They built their sanctuaries out of the raw materials of the landscape, uncut stones arranged in circles under the open sky. The mountain itself was the temple. Its peaks were the spires, its canyons the aisles, its sky the ceiling. This tells us something profound. The spiritual power of this place does not begin with the story of Moses. The story of Moses is perhaps the culmination of millennia of human experience in this landscape. The mountain was already speaking to people in its own silent language of stone and stars, long before a single word of scripture was written. It had a presence, a weight, a sense of the sacred that was born directly from its geology, its scale, its stark and imposing beauty. So this is the stage we have set, a mountain born of fire deep within the earth, a landscape of ancient red granite, cooled over millions of years, then lifted and revealed. It is a world sculpted by the slow, patient work of sun, wind, and the rare, violent power of water. It is a place of scarcity and survival, where life clings to existence in hidden sanctuaries and microclimates. And it is a land already saturated with human history and belief, a place seen as sacred for longer than we can measure. We have explored the bones of this place, its deep structure. We have felt its age, its silence, its power. We understand the foundation. We have journeyed through the eons of geology and the centuries of human reverence that have shaped this mountain. We've seen how the very rock beneath our feet was forged in the planet's mantle, and how the sun and wind have worked as patient artists to shape it. We have walked the dry wadis and felt the deep sense of history that permeates the air. The stage is now set. Every element is in place, the ancient stone, the relentless sun, the precious hidden water, and the long history of human awe. Now, in our next chapter, we can begin to populate this stage. We will look closer at the remarkable living things that call this harsh and beautiful place home, the true masters of survival. And among them we will begin our search for a very particular plant, one with a secret, a plant that holds a hidden fire within it. The journey to the burning bush has truly begun. Chapter 2. the world of the shepherd, daily rhythms and desert botany. The journey has indeed begun, but to find this plant, this vessel of hidden fire, we cannot simply survey the landscape from a great height. We must descend. We must walk the land not as explorers but as inhabitants. We must trade our modern perspective for a far older one that is weathered, patient, and intimately acquainted with thirst. We must become, for a time, a shepherd in the land of Midian. So let us feel the rough wool of a tunic against our skin, the worn leather of sandals on our feet, and the solid weight of a wooden staff in our hand. The sun is not yet risen, but a pale, ethereal light is beginning to separate the eastern horizon from the sea of stars. The air is deceptively cold, a deep, clean chill that settles in the hollows and makes the stones ache with it. This is the first lesson of the desert. The day and night are two different worlds, ruled by two different kings, one of fire and one of ice. The flock is stirring. The sound is not a loud clamour, but a soft, collective rustling, a low bleat, the gentle clatter of a hoof on stone, the sigh of a sleeping ewe. These are the first notes in the symphony of the shepherd's day, a piece of music so subtle that most would miss it entirely. But for the shepherd, this is language. He can distinguish the sound of contentment from the first stirrings of hunger, the rustle of a healthy animal from the telltale stillness of one that is sick or in distress. His ears are not just organs of hearing, they are finely calibrated instruments, tuned over thousands of dawns just like this one to the precise frequencies of his flock. He rises, not with an alarm, but with the light itself. His body is a clock set by the sun and the moon. He moves slowly, deliberately, conserving energy for the long day ahead. The first task is to check the flock, his eyes scanning each animal. This is not a head count in the modern sense. It is a personal wellness check for each member of his extended woolly family. He knows them not as a mass, but as individuals. He knows the bold one who always leads, the nervous young ewe, the old ram with the chipped horn. His gaze is a form of care, a silent question posed to each creature. Are you well? And then, the day's great question presents itself. A question that has been asked in this land since the first domesticated goat was led out of its pen. Where is the kala? Where is the forage? In a lush green land, this question is an afterthought. But here, it is the central problem of existence. The shepherd lifts his gaze to the horizon. He is not looking for fields of green. He is reading a map that no cartographer could ever draw, a map made of shadow, stone, and memory. He remembers a wadi, a dry riverbed, where a storm passed through 2 weeks ago. Perhaps a few stubborn shoots have taken advantage of that fleeting moisture. He remembers a northern slope of a particular jebel, a mountain, that holds the morning dew a little longer than the others. He is a living library of environmental knowledge, his mind a repository of generations of trial and error. His ancestors walked this same land, and their wisdom flows in his blood as surely as his own. He knows which plants are medicine, which are water thieves, and which are poison disguised as a meal. With a soft call, a sound that is more of a vibration in the throat than a word, he begins to move. The flock follows, a river of dun-coloured wool flowing over the rocks, and so begins the rhythm of the day, a rhythm of immense and profound monotony. The sound of his staff tapping the stone, the crunch of sand and gravel under hundreds of small hooves, the incessant, gentle bleating of the sheep, and the deeper, more guttural calls of the goats, and over it all, the immense, profound silence of the desert. This silence is not an absence of sound. It is a presence. It is a physical weight that presses in on the ears, clearing out the clutter of the mind. In this silence, every tiny sound is magnified. The buzz of a fly is an event. The skittering of a lizard over a rock is a drama. The cry of a distant falcon is a message from the sky. This is the shepherd's world, a place of extreme sensory focus, born from a landscape of extreme sensory deprivation. As the sun climbs, the cold vanishes, and the second king, the king of fire, takes his throne. The heat is not a gentle warmth. It is a physical force, an invisible hammer that beats down on the land, shimmering the air and bleaching the color from the rocks. Now the search for forage becomes a search for shade, and in this part of the world, shade is almost always synonymous with one tree, the undisputed queen of the arid lands, the acacia. To a traveler, an acacia tree might seem a poor excuse for a forest. Its canopy is often sparse, its leaves tiny, its branches thorny and skeletal. But to the shepherd, it is a cathedral. It is a landmark, a meeting point, a source of food, medicine, and shelter. It is a promise kept by the land that life against all odds will find a way. We see them dotting the landscape, particularly the Acacia tortilis, the umbrella thorn acacia, and Acacia radiana. Their flattened canopies are a masterpiece of engineering, designed to capture the maximum amount of sunlight in the early morning and late afternoon, while providing a small patch of concentrated shade directly beneath it during the brutal peak of noon. This is the shepherd's resting place, his midday sanctuary. Let's get closer to one. Feel the bark. It's rough, deeply fissured, a history of dry seasons and flash floods written into its skin. And the thorns are everything. They are long, sharp, and arranged in pairs, one straight, one hooked, a perfect defense system against any creature that might want to strip its precious leaves. The shepherd knows these thorns intimately. He has had them in his hands, his feet, his robes. They are a constant, painful reminder that nothing in this land is given freely. Yet the acacia is also a giver. Its seed pods, twisted into a distinctive spiral, are a vital source of protein for his goats, who with their tough mouths and incredible agility can browse where the sheep cannot. The shepherd might collect the gum that seeps from wounds in the bark. This is gum arabic, a precious commodity, a thickener for food, a binder for ink, a soothing agent for sore throats. This single tree is an entire economy, a whole pharmacy, a complete ecosystem. Tiny birds nest among its thorns, protected from predators. Insects swarm its pale puffball flowers. Its roots, a vast and secret network deep underground, may stretch twice as far as the tree is tall, a desperate patient search for water that is an inspiration in itself. To the shepherd, this tree is not just wood and leaves. It is a character, a personality, an ancient and steadfast friend. It is the shitta tree, the very wood from which the Ark of the Covenant was said to be built. It is a piece of holy architecture, standing right here in the middle of nowhere. But the flock cannot live on acacia pods alone. The shepherd's eyes are always scanning the ground, looking for the subtler signs of life. He points his staff towards a low, wiry shrub. This is the broom tree, Ritem in Hebrew. It looks almost like a tumbleweed that decided to put down roots, a chaotic tangle of thin, green, almost leafless branches. It offers scant shade, but a desperate man can find shelter beneath it, as the prophet Elijah did when he fled into the wilderness. Its roots are renowned for making the best charcoal, a fire that burns long and hot, a small comfort in the freezing desert night. He knows that its presence often indicates sandy soil, a different kind of terrain underfoot. Nearby, growing in a rocky crevice, is a clump of what looks like dusty green-grey leaves. The shepherd plucks one, rubs it between his thumb and forefinger, and holds it to his nose. The scent is sharp, medicinal, and intensely bitter. This is wormwood, Artemisia herba alba. For his flock, it is a dewormer, a natural medicine they will instinctively nibble on. For him, a tea made from its leaves can settle a stomach or fight a fever. The taste is challenging, but in a world where wellness is a fragile state, bitterness is the flavor of survival. His gaze continues its sweep. There, clinging to the thin soil at the base of a boulder, is a low-lying cushion of green. He recognizes it instantly. This is a variety of wild thyme, the key ingredient in the famous spice blend za'atar. He crushes a sprig, and the air fills with that warm, savory, unmistakable fragrance. This is not just a plant, it is a taste of home. A sprinkle of this on a piece of dry flatbread, dipped in a little olive oil, can transform a meager meal into a feast. It is a small joy, a tiny luxury, but in the vast emptiness of the desert, small joys are anchors for the soul. They are the details that keep a person sane. The shepherd understands the power of these details. His life is a mosaic of them. He guides the flock away from a particular shrub with large pale green leaves and strange balloon-like fruit. This is Calotropis procera, the Sodom apple or giant milkweed. It is a plant of deception. It grows robustly. Its leaves are large, suggesting a source of good forage. Its fruit looks plump and tempting, but the shepherd knows its secret. If you were to pluck one and break it open, you would find not a juicy pulp, but a puff of silky white seeds that scatter like dust in the wind. The stem, if broken, bleeds a thick white milky sap that is toxic. It can cause blindness if it gets in the eyes and is a potent irritant to the skin. The Sodom apple is a parable in plant form. Not all that thrives is wholesome. It is a lesson in discernment, a crucial skill for survival here. The desert is full of these tests, these silent riddles posed in the language of botany. And so the day wears on, a slow westward march, following the shade and the sparse vegetation. The shepherd's world is a vertical one, as much as it is horizontal. He is constantly scanning the cliffs and escarpments that rise from the wadi floor, and that is where he sees them. A small herd of Nubian ibex, standing effortlessly on a ledge that seems impossibly narrow. Their magnificent backward-curving horns are silhouetted against the blue sky. They move with a grace and confidence that is simply breathtaking. They are the true masters of this terrain. Their hooves are like rock-climbing shoes, with a hard outer edge and a soft, pliable inner pad that grips the stone. To the shepherd, they are a vision of pure, unattainable freedom. He is bound to his flock, to the slow, thirsty work of survival. They are bound to nothing but the wind and the rock. He watches them, not with envy, but with a deep, quiet reverence. They are a part of the wildness of this place, a reminder that it belongs to creatures far older and better adapted than he is. His gaze drops lower, to the jumbles of boulders at the base of the cliffs. Here, another creature makes its home. Lounging in the sun, looking like oversized furry potatoes, are the rock hyraxes, the shafan, or coney of the Bible. They look placid, almost lazy, but the shepherd knows they are incredibly wary. One of them, a sentry, is always perched on the highest rock, ready to let out a piercing cry at the first sign of danger, sending the entire colony scrambling for the safety of the deep crevices. They are a community, a society of watchers. Their constant presence is another thread in the tapestry of the desert ecosystem. They seem insignificant, but their droppings fertilize the sparse soil, and they are a food source for the eagles and the caracals. Everything here, no matter how small, has a purpose. Everything is connected in this great, intricate web of life and death. Death is a constant and quiet companion in this landscape. The shepherd's knowledge is not just of what to eat, but of what can eat him. His every footstep is a calculated risk. He never places his hand on a ledge without looking first. He never sits down without checking the ground. He is always watching for the subtle, sinister beauty of the vipers. The saw-scaled viper, whose defensive posture of rubbing its scales together produces a loud, rasping hiss, a sound like sandpaper on wood, is a warning he has learned to heed instantly. And then there is the master of ambush, the horned viper, Cerastes. It buries itself in the sand, with only its eyes and its distinctive horns protruding, waiting with infinite patience for a lizard or a rodent to pass by. Its camouflage is so perfect that you could be inches away and never see it until it is too late. These are the fiery serpents of the ancient texts, their venom a complex cocktail of toxins that attacks the blood and the tissues, a death that is both swift and agonizing. The shepherd does not hate the viper. He respects it. He sees it as a perfect expression of the desert's lethality, a reminder to always be present, to always be aware. To lose focus for even a moment is to invite disaster. The same respect is reserved for the scorpions. The pale, almost translucent form of the deathstalker, one of the most venomous species on Earth, is the stuff of nightmares. He knows that they hunt at night, and he knows to shake out his blankets before lying down, to check his sandals before putting them on. He has seen what their sting can do to a goat or a man. It is another small detail, another ritual of survival, woven into the fabric of his day. These creatures, the viper, the scorpion, are the desert's enforcers. They punish the careless and the distracted. They are the reason the shepherd's senses are so preternaturally sharp. The sun begins its long descent, painting the western sky in hues of orange, pink and violet that would make a king weep. The heat abates, and the chill begins to creep back into the air. The shepherd finds a sheltered spot, a rock overhang or a small cave, to bed the flock down for the night. He counts them again, this time with his hands, feeling their warmth, their life. He builds a small fire, not for warmth at first, but for protection, its flickering light a deterrent to the nocturnal predators, the hyenas or the caracals whose calls might soon echo from the cliffs. He eats his simple meal, a piece of dried fruit, a handful of nuts, a piece of flatbread, and as he sits by the fire, the true nature of his existence settles upon him, the solitude. This is not the loneliness of a crowded city. It is a solitude that is cosmic in scale. He is a single, warm point of life in a vast, cold, indifferent universe of stone and stars. The sky above him is not a distant ceiling. It is an ocean of infinite depth, and the stars are not faint twinkles but blazing suns, so bright and clear in the unpolluted air that they seem close enough to touch. In this profound silence, under this celestial grandeur, the mind begins to do strange things. The barrier between the self and the world becomes thin, permeable. The wind whistling through a crack in the rock can sound like a voice, a whisper. The shapes of the rocks in the firelight can resolve into faces, familiar or strange. This is a well-known psychological phenomenon, pareidolia, the brain's desperate attempt to find patterns, to find meaning in random stimulus. When the senses are starved, the imagination feasts. The mind, no longer occupied with the noise of other people, turns inward. It explores its own depths, its own canyons and wastelands. It grapples with the great fundamental questions of existence, because out here, there is nothing to distract from them. Who am I? Why am I here? What is the nature of this vast, silent power that surrounds me? This is the psychological crucible in which prophets are forged. A mind emptied of distraction and filled with the immensity of the natural world. A state of heightened awareness where every rustle, every scent, every shadow is laden with potential meaning. The shepherd is not a philosopher in an academic sense, but his life is a continuous practical meditation. He is more connected to the reality of his world than any city dweller could ever be. He is a part of the landscape, and the landscape is a part of him. His thoughts are shaped by the rhythm of the seasons. His moods are influenced by the direction of the wind. His dreams are populated by the creatures he shares this space with. And it is in this state, this unique blend of immense practical knowledge and profound spiritual openness, that he is able to notice things that others would miss. He has an eye for the anomalous, for the thing that does not quite belong. His search for forage is not just a search for the familiar, it is also a search for the unusual, the unexpected. A patch of green in a place that should be barren, a flower of a color he has not seen before, a plant that seems to defy the harsh logic of its surroundings. Over many seasons he has come to know of a particular plant. It is not common. It prefers secluded, rocky places, often on limestone outcrops, where it can find some shelter from the worst of the sun and wind. It doesn't look like a typical desert plant. Its leaves are a brighter green, glossy and shaped like the leaves of an ash tree. It is called by some the gas plant, or fraxinella, and in the heat of a still, late afternoon, if you get close to it, you can smell a powerful, aromatic scent, something like lemon and vanilla, a perfume that seems utterly out of place in this world of dust and rock. The plant exudes a volatile, flammable oil from tiny glands on its leaves and flowers. It creates its own small, fragrant and highly combustible atmosphere. It is a whisper of another, lusher world, a botanical secret. Tonight, the shepherd has led his flock to just such a place, a narrow rocky ravine, far from the usual grazing paths. He was drawn here by a hunch, a memory of water from a past season. He is tired. The day has been long and hot. The flock is settled. The fire is burning low. His mind is quiet, receptive, tuned to the subtle frequencies of the wilderness. He sits against a rock, his staff across his lap, and gazes into the deepening twilight. The air is still, completely, utterly still, and on the air he begins to catch that strange, sweet, citrus scent. He lifts his head, his eyes scanning the rocky slope above him. He sees a cluster of those bright green leaves, a plant that seems to hold the last of the daylight within it. He does not know its name, not in the way a botanist would, but he knows its nature. He knows it is different. He knows it holds a secret. He watches it, as the last light fades from the sky and the world settles into a profound and waiting silence. The stage is set, the audience is won, and the moment is drawing near. The world of the shepherd has led us here, to this exact spot, at this exact time, where the mundane is about to touch the miraculous. Chapter 3. The Prime Suspect. A botanical deep dive into Dictamnus albus. And the secret that this plant holds, the name that the shepherd does not know, is Dictamnus albus. It is a name that sounds almost like a spell, a whisper from an old book of forgotten science. Dictamnus, from Mount Dicte on the island of Crete, a place steeped in mythology, a supposed birthplace of gods. And albus, the simple Latin for white, referring to the colour of its most common flower form. But this plant is known by many other names, each a clue to its strange and beautiful nature. Some call it the gas plant, others the Dittany, and many, with a knowing calm, call it the burning bush. Here, in our quiet exploration, we will become botanical detectives. The story has brought us to a suspect, and now we must conduct our investigation, not with haste, but with the patient thoroughness of nature itself. We must get to know this plant, to understand its life, its chemistry, its very soul, to see if it truly fits the description of the marvel that stopped a shepherd in his tracks thousands of years ago. Let us begin with its form, its physical presence. Imagine we are kneeling beside it, the dust of the Sinai still on our clothes, the evening air beginning to cool. Dictamnus albus is not a towering tree, nor a thorny, aggressive shrub like the acacia. It is a perennial, a creature of patience, that dies back to its roots each winter only to rise again in the spring, a quiet resurrection. It grows in a handsome clump, standing about 2 to 4 feet tall, a respectable height, creating a dense island of foliage. The stems are strong but not woody, covered in fine, almost invisible glandular hairs which we will return to, for they are the heart of the mystery. The leaves are its lungs and its solar panels. They are a deep, glossy green, a sign of a plant that is healthy and confident in its place. They are what botanists call pinnate, which is a lovely architectural word. It means they look like feathers. A central stem extends, and from it pairs of leaflets branch out, anywhere from 9 to 11 of them, each one a perfect, smaller version of a leaf, with finely toothed edges. If you were to touch one, you would feel a slightly leathery, waxy texture, and you would notice something else, an aroma. Even without crushing the leaf, a faint perfume lingers in the air around it, a scent that is clean, sharp, and citrusy, like lemon peel, and something deeper, more resinous and wild. It is the plant's breath, its constant, quiet exhalation. This scent is our first major clue. And then there are the flowers. In late spring and early summer, the plant sends up tall, elegant spires or racemes from its center, and along these spires the blossoms open. They are the plant's great announcement to the world. Each flower is a masterpiece of asymmetry. It has 5 petals, but they are not arranged in a simple radial star. 4 of them reach upwards, like fingers, while the 5th, larger and more ornate, curves downwards, a perfect landing platform for a visiting bee. These petals are most often a soft, milky white, but they can be a pale pink or a gentle lilac, and they are not a solid color. They are etched with delicate, branching veins of a darker purple or crimson, a network of fine lines that look as if they were drawn with a quill pen by a master calligrapher. They are nature's own filigree, guiding insects toward the pollen and nectar within. From the center of the flower, the stamens and the pistil arc outwards and upwards, long and graceful, giving the blossom an exotic, almost orchid-like appearance. They seem to be reaching for something just beyond their grasp, and on the tips of these stamens, the anthers are coated in a fine, bright orange dust of pollen. The entire structure is designed for a single purpose: to continue, to create the next generation. Once pollinated, the flower gives way to something equally remarkable. A seed capsule forms, a 5-lobed star-shaped pod. As it dries in the summer heat, the tension within it builds and builds until one day it splits open with an audible snap, flinging its small, black, glossy seeds several feet away from the parent. It is an act of explosive determination, ensuring its children do not have to grow up in its shadow. This is the plant in its physical form. A beautiful, well-mannered perennial with leaves like feathers and flowers like works of art. But its appearance, however lovely, is not what makes it our prime suspect. To understand that, we must look deeper. We must go beyond what we can see with our eyes and journey into the invisible world of its biochemistry. We must explore the reason for that citrus scent, for that perfume is not merely a perfume. It is a cloud of flammable vapor, a volatile halo that the plant carefully and methodically manufactures, day in and day out. Every living thing is a master chemist, but some are more ostentatious about it than others. Dictamnus albus is a quiet virtuoso. Inside its cells, in microscopic assembly lines perfected over millions of years, it builds special molecules. These molecules belong to a vast and ancient family of organic compounds called isoprenoids, or terpenes. These are the compounds responsible for some of the most iconic scents on Earth: the sharp, clean scent of pine needles, the comforting aroma of lavender, the bright tang of a lemon peel, the deep resinous smell of frankincense. They are, in essence, nature's essential oils. The plant does not make them for our benefit, of course. For Dictamnus, these chemicals are tools for survival. They are a complex language spoken to the world around it. The strong citrus scent, which we find so pleasant, is a powerful deterrent to many grazing animals. A deer or a goat, taking a bite of a leaf, would get a mouthful of this bitter, pungent oil and would likely learn to avoid the plant in the future. It is a chemical shield, a way of saying "do not eat me," without having to grow thorns or spines. The oils also have antimicrobial and antifungal properties, protecting the leaves from disease, and some scientists believe they may even be allelopathic, meaning they can seep into the soil and inhibit the growth of competing plants nearby, a form of gentle but effective territorial warfare. So, how does it make them? It begins, as all life on Earth begins, with sunlight. The plant captures the energy of the sun through photosynthesis, converting it into simple sugars. This is its basic fuel. But then, it does something remarkable. It diverts some of this precious energy, this hard-won sugar, into a more specialized manufacturing process. It takes the basic carbon building blocks and through a series of complex enzymatic reactions, stitches them together into 5 carbon units called isoprene. Think of these isoprene units as individual Lego bricks. The plant can then link these bricks together in different ways to create a staggering variety of larger molecules. 2 bricks together make a monoterpene, the primary component of its essential oil. The most famous of these in Dictamnus is a molecule you know well, limonene. It is the very same molecule that gives lemons and oranges their characteristic scent. The plant is in essence building perfume from sunlight and air. It is a quiet, cellular alchemy, but making the oil is only the first half of the process. The second and more crucial part of our investigation is how it gets this oil from the inside of the leaf to the outside. This is where those tiny glandular hairs we mentioned earlier come into play. Let's zoom in, with our mind's eye, onto the surface of a single leaf. What looks smooth and glossy from a distance is actually a textured landscape of microscopic structures. Among the normal cells of the leaf's epidermis, we find these specialized glands, technically known as capitate trichomes. Imagine a mushroom, but impossibly small. There is a slender stalk, and at the top of that stalk, a tiny spherical head. This head is a miniature biological balloon, a storage facility for the essential oil. Deep in the leaf, the isoprenoid factories are working, producing limonene and other volatile compounds. This oil is then transported up the tiny stalk and pumped into the balloon-like head. The head is sealed by a delicate membrane, a cuticle. As more and more oil is produced, the pressure inside this tiny sphere builds. It swells like a water droplet on a faucet, getting fuller and fuller. The membrane stretches, becoming taut, and then one of two things happens. A slight touch, perhaps from a passing insect or a gentle breeze, might be enough to rupture the delicate sphere, releasing its fragrant contents in a tiny, invisible puff. Or, on a very hot day, the oil inside might expand, increasing the pressure until the gland simply bursts on its own. Now imagine this not happening once, but millions and millions of times, all over the surface of every leaf, every stem, and especially every flower and developing seed pod on the entire plant. The plant is constantly, slowly, and silently weeping this volatile lemon-scented oil into the atmosphere around it. Each ruptured gland adds another few molecules to an ever-growing cloud. This brings us to the final pieces of the puzzle, the environmental conditions. The plant's chemistry is the first part of the equation, but the weather and the location are the second. The phenomenon of the burning bush does not happen on a cool, windy day. It requires what we might call a perfect storm of stillness. Let's return to our shepherd in the Sinai, or any other arid, rocky region where Dictamnus albus makes its home. It prefers to grow in places with well-drained soil, often on rocky slopes, in woodland clearings, or nestled in the shelter of a ravine. These are places that can get incredibly hot during the day, but which are also sheltered from the wind. Imagine a long, scorching summer day. The sun beats down, heating the rocks and the soil. The Dictamnum albus plant, basking in this heat, goes into overdrive. The high temperature accelerates its metabolic processes. The production of the volatile oils increases. But more importantly, the heat causes the oils that have already been secreted to evaporate much more quickly. The liquid oil on the leaves and stems turns into a vapor. The air around the plant becomes saturated with these heavy organic molecules. Now consider the air. On a perfectly still day, with no breeze to stir the atmosphere, this vapor does not disperse. The molecules of limonene and the other isoprenoids are heavier than the molecules of the surrounding air, heavier than nitrogen, heavier than oxygen. So what do? They sink. The vapor flows gently downwards, pooling around the base of the plant in a dense, invisible and highly flammable cloud. Throughout the hot afternoon, this concentration builds and builds. The plant sits in its own self-made shroud of combustible perfume. The air itself becomes thick with potential energy, a silent, fragrant fuel air bomb waiting for a single tiny spark. The scent would be almost overpowering, a deep, resinous citrus aroma, hanging heavy and motionless in the heat. It is a sign, a warning, a declaration of the plant's potent chemistry. The stage is set. All the elements are in place. The fuel has been manufactured and deployed. The conditions are perfect. All that is missing is a source of ignition. And what could that be? It doesn't require a lightning strike, though that would certainly do the trick. It could be something much smaller, much more mundane. It could be the static electricity generated by dust particles rubbing against each other in the super dry air. It could be two pieces of silica-rich rock, like flint, being knocked together by a shifting of the ground or a passing animal. Some have even theorized that the plant's own explosive seed-flinging mechanism could generate a tiny frictional spark. Whatever the source, it only needs to be a tiny spark, a brief moment of sufficient heat. And in that moment, the miraculous happens. a flame ignites. But it is not the kind of fire we are used to. It does not latch onto the leaves and stems and begin to consume them. Instead, the flame rips through the cloud of vapor surrounding the plant. It is a phenomenon known as a flash fire. There is a sudden audible whoosh, a soft explosion of light and sound. A pale blue or yellowish flame engulfs the entire plant for a mere second, a ghostly apparition of fire. It races through the fuel-rich vapor, consuming it in an instant. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it is gone. The air shimmers for a moment from the heat. The strong smell of lemon is momentarily replaced by the fainter, sharper scent of ozone and combustion. And the plant is entirely unharmed. The flash fire was so rapid, its temperature so relatively low, and its duration so brief that it didn't have time to transfer enough heat to ignite the leaves themselves. The waxy coating on the leaves provides an extra layer of protection. The fire burned the air around the bush, not the bush itself. It sits there in the aftermath, green, glossy, and completely intact, as if nothing had happened at all. This single crucial detail is what elevates Dictamnus albus from a curious plant to the leading candidate for the biblical burning bush. The text is very specific. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. It is the central paradox of the story, the thing that signals a violation of the normal laws of nature. And yet, here we have a plant that through its unique and perfectly adapted biochemistry and anatomy can produce this very effect. It creates a fire that does not consume. It is not magic. It is a stunning piece of evolutionary engineering. It is nature producing a result so strange, so counterintuitive, that it feels like a miracle. Now, in any good investigation, we must consider other possibilities. We must be thorough. Could another plant or another phenomenon be responsible? Some have suggested the acacia tree, a common plant in the Sinai region. It is a thorny, rugged tree, well adapted to the desert. The theory here is not about volatile oils, but about static electricity. In the dry, dusty conditions of the desert, an acacia tree could potentially accumulate a significant static charge, which might then discharge in the form of St. Elmo's fire, a type of glowing plasma. It might cause the bush to appear to be glowing, perhaps with a faint, eerie light. But there are problems with this theory. St. Elmo's fire is a weather-related electrical phenomenon. It requires specific atmospheric conditions and typically occurs on pointed objects during thunderstorms. It is not a property of the plant itself. It would not be repeatable, and it doesn't quite fit the description of burning with fire. A luminous glow is not the same as a flame. Furthermore, why would this happen to one specific acacia bush and not others nearby? The explanation lacks the beautiful, self-contained elegance of the Dictamnus hypothesis, which relies entirely on the inherent properties of a single special plant. Another group of candidates are the highly resinous plants, like the cistus or rock rose. These shrubs produce a sticky, aromatic resin called labdanum, which has been used in perfumes for centuries. This resin is certainly flammable. A cistus bush can indeed go up in flames quite spectacularly, especially in the dry heat of summer. But here we run into the opposite problem. The resin is on the leaves and stems, and when it burns, the plant burns with it. It would be utterly consumed by the fire, reduced to ash and charcoal. It cannot account for the core detail of the story. The bush was not consumed. And so, after examining the other suspects, we return to Dictamnus albus. It remains our prime suspect, the one whose story aligns most perfectly with the evidence. Its geographical range fits. While its primary distribution is from southern Europe to Asia, there are subspecies and related plants in the Middle East, and its historical range could well have included the Sinai Peninsula, especially in sheltered mountainous areas with more moisture, like the region around Mount Sinai itself. Its flowering season in late spring and early summer aligns with the time of year when the heat would be intense enough to create the vapor cloud. And most importantly, its unique biochemistry provides a scientifically plausible mechanism for every single detail of the phenomenon: the fire, the lack of consumption, and the sudden awe-inspiring appearance of it all. Let's take a moment to truly appreciate the exquisite elegance of this adaptation. The plant is not trying to burn. This is not its purpose. The production of volatile oils is a defense mechanism. It is a way to protect itself from being eaten and to ward off disease. The fact that this chemical shield also happens to be flammable is a side effect, a quirk of organic chemistry. The plant has, over millennia, evolved a tolerance to this occasional flash fire. It has developed leaves that can withstand the brief, intense heat. It has turned a potentially dangerous vulnerability, being saturated in a flammable gas, into a neutral or perhaps even beneficial event. Some have even speculated that the flash fire might help the plant by clearing away competing vegetation or deterring herbivores in a rather dramatic fashion, but its primary purpose remains chemical defense. We can see the plant now not just as a passive object, but as an active participant in its own survival. It is a chemical factory, a master of molecular engineering. It breathes out a fragrant, invisible armor. It has harnessed the power of the sun to create a shield that, under a precise set of circumstances, can burst into a harmless spectral flame. It is a living thing that has mastered fire in a way no other plant has. Think of the energy required to manufacture these complex isoprenoid molecules from simple sugars is an energetically expensive process. A significant portion of the plant's daily solar budget is diverted to this task. A lesser plant might use that energy to grow taller, to produce more leaves, or to develop a deeper root system. But Dictamnus has chosen a different path. It has invested in chemistry. It has gambled that creating this potent, volatile defense is a more effective strategy for long-term survival in its particular environment. And for millions of years, that bet has paid off. Let's consider the aroma once more. That lemon scent. It is composed primarily of D-limonene. Our noses are exquisitely sensitive to this molecule. We can detect it at concentrations of just a few parts per billion. As we approach the plant on a hot, still day, the scent would grow from a pleasant hint of citrus to a thick, almost overwhelming perfume. This sensory crescendo is part of the experience. It is the plant announcing its presence and its power. It is an olfactory warning sign, a signal that the air here is different, that it is charged with something special. A shepherd, whose life is lived through the senses, would surely notice this. He would be drawn to the strange, strong smell, a clean and powerful aroma in a landscape of dust and dry grass. He would approach with curiosity, his senses heightened, long before any flame appeared. And what of the sound? The whoosh. It would break the profound silence of the desert evening. Not a loud, terrifying explosion, but a soft, deep, sudden rush of air, the sound of a giant, gentle exhalation, the sound of chemistry happening at a macro scale. It is the sound of potential energy being converted into heat and light in the blink of an eye. The combination of the strange, intense aroma, the sudden, soft sound, and the ghostly, harmless flame appearing from nowhere and engulfing a living plant without burning it. It is an experience that sits perfectly on the edge of the natural and the supernatural. It does not require us to deny science to understand why this would be seen as a divine message. In fact, it is the science that makes it so profound. It reveals that the universe we inhabit is so much more clever, so much more intricate than we often give it credit for. It shows us that a miracle does not have to be a violation of natural law, but can instead be a perfect and rare confluence of it. A moment when botany, chemistry, physics and meteorology all intersect in one specific place, at one specific time, to create an event of pure and baffling wonder. The shepherd did not need to know the name Dictamnus albus. He did not need to understand the molecular structure of isoprenoids or the function of capitate trichomes. He saw the result. He saw a truth. He saw a plant on fire, but not consumed. And in that moment, the world shifted. Our detailed forensic deep dive into this one remarkable plant does not diminish the wonder of that moment. It amplifies it. It shows us that beneath the surface of the world, there are secrets and mechanisms of breathtaking ingenuity. It reminds us that sometimes the most astonishing truths are not hidden in the heavens, but are waiting patiently in the quiet chemistry of a single unassuming plant, ready for the right moment to reveal a fire that does not burn. The investigation points to one conclusion. We have found our burning bush. Chapter 4. The fire that does not consume. The physics of a chemical phenomenon. And so we have found our burning bush. But to give a name to a thing is not the same as to understand it. To identify the vessel is only the first step. The true mystery, the question that has echoed through millennia, has now simply shifted its form. It is no longer a question of what, but a question of how. How does a fire bloom from thin air? How can a flame exist with such brilliance, yet possess no hunger, no desire to consume the life that gives it form? We stand now at the precipice of the event itself, moving from the quiet work of botany into the realm of physics and chemistry, where energy is transferred and matter is transformed in the blink of an eye. Let us draw closer, not with instruments of faith, but with the quiet curiosity that is its own form of reverence. Let us investigate this fire that does not burn. The stage must first be set. The phenomenon we are about to witness is not a common one. It is a performance that requires very specific conditions, a conspiracy of climate and chemistry. Picture a day in the Judean wilderness, or any arid sun-beaten landscape where Dictamnus albus might grow. The sun is high and relentless, the air is heavy, still and dry. There is no breeze to stir the leaves or carry away a scent. The heat presses down on the land, baking the stones and drawing the moisture from the very air itself. It is on days like this, when the world seems to be holding its breath, that the plant begins its quiet work. As we learned, the entire plant, from its leaves to its star-shaped flowers, is covered in tiny glands. Think of them as microscopic distilleries. Under the pressure of the intense heat, these glands work tirelessly, exuding a fine, invisible mist of volatile essential oils. The primary component, limonene, is the very same compound that gives lemons and oranges their sharp, refreshing scent. But here, it is joined by other flammable terpenes, and together they create something more than a perfume. They create an aura. This is not a cloud in the way we might imagine smoke or fog. It is far more subtle, a shimmering, invisible cloak of vapor that clings to the plant, densest near the flowers and leaves, and gradually dissipating into the surrounding air. If you were to walk by on such a day, you wouldn't see it, but you would sense it. The air around the bush would feel strangely thick, and it would carry that intense citrusy, almost resinous fragrance. The plant is essentially building its own private flammable atmosphere, a halo of scented fuel waiting for a single critical element, a source of ignition. And here, nature provides a wealth of possibilities, each one a quiet, plausible miracle in its own right. The most dramatic, of course, is a lightning strike from a summer storm, nature's own celestial matchstick, descending from the heavens. A single bolt striking nearby would be more than enough to ignite the vapor cloud, but this feels too grand, too random. The story of the burning bush feels more intimate, more personal. So let us consider a gentler spark, one born of the earth itself. The deserts of the Middle East are lands of low humidity. In this dry air, static electricity builds with remarkable ease. Now imagine a shepherd moving through the landscape at dusk. He is cloaked in woolen garments, his flock of sheep nearby, their own coats thick with lanolin and dry fibers. As he walks, the friction of the wool against his body, against the dry grasses, turns him into a walking generator of static charge. It's the same principle that allows you to feel a tiny shock when you touch a metal doorknob after walking across a carpet in winter. The shepherd, perhaps seeking a moment of rest, reaches out to brush a branch of this fragrant plant aside. Or maybe an animal from his flock, a goat or a sheep, nudges its flank against the leaves. In that moment, a tiny, almost invisible spark, a miniature lightning bolt no bigger than a pinprick, leaps from his hand or from the animal's fur to the plant. It is a spark carrying just enough energy, just enough heat to cross the threshold. To our modern minds, a static spark seems mundane, but in that silent, arid landscape, that tiny snap of energy would be enough. It would be the catalyst, the question that the flammable air was waiting to answer. There is another, even more poetic possibility, one that requires no storm and no shepherd, only the patient mechanics of light and water. Imagine the same hot day is followed by a cool night. As the temperature drops, dew begins to form, condensing out of the air onto the cool surfaces of the plant. 1,000 tiny, perfect spheres of water cling to the petals and leaves. Then, the sun rises. The first rays of dawn strike the landscape at a low angle, and one of those dewdrops, positioned in just the right place on a petal, becomes a lens, a perfect, temporary, biological magnifying glass. Just as a child might use a magnifying glass to focus sunlight onto a dry leaf, this single drop of water gathers the morning light, concentrating the sun's energy into a single, intensely hot focal point. If that point of focused light happens to land within the invisible cloud of vapor, ignition, a fire lit by a joule of water and a ray of sun, it is a moment of such exquisite natural alignment it feels like destiny. Regardless of the source, be it the grand power of a lightning strike, the subtle crackle of static, or the focused poetry of a dewdrop, the result is the same, and it is breathtaking. The ignition of the vapor cloud is not a fire as we know it. It is not the slow, deliberate consumption of wood in a campfire. It is a flash fire, a rapid, near-instantaneous combustion of the airborne fuel. The technical term is deflagration, a wave of combustion that moves at subsonic speeds, but the experience of it is pure spectacle. There would be a sudden, audible whoosh, a soft, percussive pop, like a gas stove igniting but deeper and more resonant, echoing in the stillness of the desert. And with the sound comes the light, a brilliant, startling flash of orange-blue flame that erupts around the entire plant, tracing the shape of the invisible vapor cloud. For a single stunning moment, the bush is wreathed in a silent, luminous fire. It would seem to appear from nothing and engulf everything. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it is gone. The entire event lasts for perhaps a second, maybe two, a fleeting, ethereal blaze that vanishes into the air from which it was born. And in its wake, the plant, Dictamnus albus, stands completely unharmed, untouched, unsinged. The leaves are still green, the delicate flowers still perfect. The physics behind this miracle are as elegant as the phenomenon itself. The fire doesn't consume the plant because it isn't burning the plant. It is burning the fuel in the air around the plant. The combustion is so rapid, the duration of the heat so brief, that there simply isn't enough time for a significant amount of thermal energy to be transferred to the plant's tissues. The plant's own internal moisture content acts as a further buffer, a natural fireproofing. The flame kisses the surface of the leaf, but is gone before it can cause a burn. It is the ghost of a fire with light and sound but no substance, no lingering heat. The only evidence left behind would be the smell. The air, once filled with the fresh citrus scent of limonene, would now carry the sharp, pleasant aroma of burnt orange peel, a fleeting olfactory signature of the event. To a witness, the experience would be profoundly disorienting and deeply moving. A bush, speaking with a voice of fire and light, yet remaining perfectly whole. It is the perfect illusion, the perfect paradox. And it's humbling, really, to realize that this breathtaking display is, in essence, a form of self-defense. The plant isn't putting on a show for us. These volatile oils are designed to deter herbivores, to make the plant unpalatable. The fact that this chemical defense is also flammable is a beautiful, accidental consequence of its molecular structure, a side effect of evolution that happens to align with one of humanity's most enduring and powerful stories. But what if? What if the story we seek was not about Dictamnus at all? Nature, in its boundless creativity, has other ways of painting with light and fire, other phenomena that could easily be interpreted as a miracle by an unsuspecting observer. To be thorough in our quiet investigation, we must consider these alternatives. We must turn our gaze from the chemistry of a single plant to the strange physics of the air itself and the even stranger biology of the forest floor. Let us consider a phenomenon known to sailors for centuries, a spectre of the storm called St. Elmo's fire. This is not fire in any conventional sense. It is plasma. It occurs during thunderstorms when the atmosphere is charged with immense electrical potential. The ground develops a strong opposite charge, and the air between becomes a super-stressed medium, humming with electrical tension. On a ship's mast, or a church steeple, or perhaps on the tip of a shepherd's staff, or even the horns of his flock, this electrical charge can concentrate. If the electric field is strong enough, it can tear electrons from the atoms in the air, from nitrogen and oxygen molecules. This process, called corona discharge, creates a luminous plasma that glows with a cold, eerie light. Imagine a shepherd huddled on a mountainside as a storm approaches. The air grows heavy and electric, and then he sees it. A ghostly, silent flame, blue or violet, begins to dance and flicker at the end of his wooden staff. It emits no heat. It makes no smoke. It might be accompanied by a faint hissing or buzzing sound. It clings to the staff, or to a nearby thorny bush, bathing it in an unearthly glow that seems to come from within the object itself. It is not a fire that consumes, it is the air itself being set alight by an unseen power. To witness St. Elmo's fire would be to witness the very fabric of the sky made visible, a silent, cold fire that would surely be seen as a divine omen. From the fire of the sky, we move to a fire born of decay, a light that is not a product of physics, but of biology. Let us journey to the floor of a dark, damp forest, long after the sun has set. Here, another kind of light can be found, known as foxfire. This is the gentle, steady glow of bioluminescent fungi. Certain species of fungus, as they break down rotting wood, engage in a beautiful chemical reaction. It involves a molecule called luciferin and an enzyme called luciferase, the very same chemical toolkit used by fireflies to light up a summer evening. But here, the light is constant. It is chemistry's quiet answer to a star. A log or a stump, thoroughly colonized by one of these fungi, will emit a soft greenish-blue light. It is a cold, living light, a lantern lit by the process of decomposition. Now imagine a bush growing over or intertwined with a piece of wood that is glowing with foxfire. On a moonless night, from a distance, the bush itself would appear to be the source of the light. It would seem to be glowing from within, its core illuminated by a gentle, holy fire that gives off no heat and makes no sound. It would not be a sudden flash, but a constant, mysterious presence, a holy ground, lit not by a sudden miracle, but by the slow, patient, and equally miraculous work of fungi. And then there are the fires that are not fires at all, the fires that are merely tricks of the light, illusions woven by the atmosphere itself. We have all seen a mirage on a hot road in the distance, a shimmering patch that looks like a pool of water. This is caused by light from the sky being bent upwards as it passes through the hot layer of air just above the pavement. In the desert, the atmosphere is a master illusionist. A phenomenon called an inferior mirage can take a bright object near the horizon like the setting sun and make it appear to flicker and dance, creating shimmering flame-like shapes below it. It could make the setting sun look like a pool of fire on the ground. An even more complex illusion is the Fata Morgana, a superior mirage where layers of warm and cold air act like a vast, imperfect lens. It can take objects far beyond the horizon and project them into the sky, distorted and shimmering. A distant campfire, or even a line of brightly lit sand, could be bent, magnified, and projected onto the location of a nearby bush, making it appear to be ablaze. It would be a fire with no heat, no sound, and no source, an image floating in the air, as convincing as it is incorporeal. Each of these phenomena, the electrical plasma of St. Elmo's fire, the living light of foxfire, the atmospheric phantom of a mirage, is a testament to the world's capacity for wonder. Each could, under the right circumstances, provide the foundation for a story of a miraculous fire. And yet we find ourselves drawn back to Dictamnus albus. We return to the quiet chemistry of the gas plant. Why? Because St. Elmo's fire requires a thunderstorm. Foxfire requires rotting, damp wood and glows only in deep darkness. A mirage is a fleeting, distant illusion. The gas plant alone provides all the necessary elements in one elegant, self-contained package. It provides the fuel. It creates the conditions for its own ignition on a hot, still day. And most importantly, it provides the central, critical paradox of the story. The fire that flashes with startling reality, and the bush that remains in the aftermath perfectly, miraculously unconsumed. The physics are sound, the chemistry is elegant, and the result is a perfect moment of earthly magic. A fire born of perfume and air, a testament to the quiet miracles happening all around us, if we only know how and where to look. We do not need to choose between science and wonder. Here, in this remarkable plant, they are one and the same, a physical truth more beautiful and more strange than any myth. Chapter 5. The Voice from the Flames, Psychoacoustics and the Neurology of Revelation. But while the eyes are held by this beautiful, impossible paradox, a fire that does not consume, the ears are met with something else entirely. They are filled with the sound of it, the constant, gentle hiss of volatile oils turning to vapor, the sharp, percussive crackle as pockets of resin burst in the heat, the low, rustling whisper of superheated air moving through the dense, dry leaves. And it is here, in this symphony of simple physics, that we leave the world of chemistry and enter a landscape far more intricate, far more mysterious, and far more personal. We enter the quiet, boundless territory of the human mind. Because a sound is never just a sound. A wave of pressure moving through the air is only the raw material. The real event, the thing that gives it meaning and texture and power, happens inside of us. Our brain is not a passive receiver of information, like a microphone faithfully recording the world. It is an active, tireless, and profoundly creative interpreter. It is a storyteller, and its favorite subject is meaning. It will find a story, it will find a pattern, in almost anything. It is the most sophisticated pattern recognition engine in the known universe, and it has been sculpted by millions of years of evolution for one primary purpose: to make sense of the world and to do it quickly. This relentless drive to find order in chaos, to see a face in the clouds or a figure in the shadows, has a name. It is called pareidolia, and it is not a flaw in our wiring, it is a fundamental feature of our survival. For our distant ancestors on the savannah, the cost of mistaking a rustling wind for a predator was low, a moment of needless fear, but the cost of mistaking a predator for the wind was absolute, and so we evolved to err on the side of meaning. We are primed to find signals in the noise, and while this tendency most often expresses itself visually, the man in the moon, the face on Mars, the shape of an animal in a gnarled piece of wood, it has an auditory cousin, one that is perhaps even more profound: auditory pareidolia. The perception of coherent sound, of music or whispers or voices, in random, formless noise. You have experienced this. We all have. It's the faint sound of a radio playing in another room, when it's only the hum of a refrigerator. It's the sensation of hearing your name called on the wind. It is the uncanny way the rhythmic clatter of a train on its tracks can seem to resolve into a distinct repeating phrase. In these moments, your auditory cortex, the part of your brain that processes sound, is doing its job. It's receiving the raw data. But then, other parts of the brain, particularly in the frontal lobes, the seat of our higher order thinking, our expectations and our beliefs, get involved. They are the grand interpreters. They take the ambiguous, noisy signal from the ears and they try to fit it into a template they already know. And the template our brains know better than any other, the one we are exquisitely tuned to detect from even before birth, is the human voice. Now, let us place ourselves in the landscape. Let us leave our quiet rooms and stand in the vast, resonant emptiness of the Sinai. The environment itself becomes an instrument. The soundscape of the desert is not one of silence. It is a complex tapestry of subtle noises. There is the wind, a constant presence. It is not a single uniform sound, it is a chorus. There is the low, mournful moan as it passes over the crest of a dune. There is the high, sibilant hiss as it scours grains of sand against the face of a rock. There is the hollow, flute-like whistle as it finds a fissure in a stone. Each of these sounds contains a universe of frequencies, a chaotic blend of high and low tones with no inherent pattern. This is the perfect raw material for the meaning-making mind. Then, add to this the sound of our burning bush, our Dictamnus albus. It is not a roaring bonfire. It is a quiet, intimate event. The sound is close, immediate. There is the staccato crackling, a sound rich with consonants, the hard K and T sounds that form the building blocks of speech. There is the sustained, airy hiss of vaporizing oils, a sound uncannily similar to the sibilant S or she sounds so common in human language. And beneath it all, the gentle rustle of leaves, a soft, percussive bed of noise. And perhaps, layered over all of this, is the high-frequency, otherworldly hum of desert insects, the cicadas or the locusts, a sound that can, after hours of listening, seem to shimmer and modulate with a strange intelligence of its own. An isolated shepherd, standing before this display, is immersed in a sea of ambiguous, suggestive sound. The wind, the fire, the insects, all of it combines into a complex broadband noise. It is auditory static, and the human brain, presented with static, will do what it always does. It will begin to search for the signal. It will try to resolve the noise into a pattern it recognizes. The brain's predictive models, shaped by a lifetime of listening to human speech, begin to project themselves onto the chaos. A gust of wind whistling through the branches becomes a vowel. A sharp crackle of resin becomes a consonant. The rhythm of the flame becomes the cadence of a sentence. The brain, in its profound and desperate desire to understand, is not merely hearing, it is co-creating the experience. It is finding the ghost of a voice in the machine of the fire. But the external environment is only half of the story. The internal environment, the landscape of the observer's own body and mind, is arguably even more important. The power of pareidolia is not a constant. It can be dramatically amplified by our physiological and psychological state. And the state of a shepherd, alone for weeks or months in the harsh wilderness of the Sinai, is an altered state by its very definition. Consider first the simple and brutal reality of dehydration. In the desert, under a relentless sun, the body loses water at an alarming rate. Dehydration is not just a matter of thirst. It is a systemic crisis that directly impacts the brain. As water volume in the body drops, the balance of electrolytes, the sodium, potassium, and chloride ions that govern every single nerve impulse, is thrown into disarray. The communication between neurons begins to falunction. The brain's electrical signaling becomes erratic, less stable. This can lead to confusion, dizziness, and, crucially, a heightened susceptibility to perceptual disturbances. The line between what is real and what is imagined begins to blur, not as a matter of poetry, but as a matter of compromised neurochemistry. The brain's ability to correctly filter and interpret sensory data is impaired. The overeager interpreter, already looking for patterns, becomes even less discerning. Then there is malnutrition. The diet of a nomadic shepherd would have been monotonous and often insufficient. Prolonged periods of caloric deficit and a lack of essential vitamins and minerals take their toll. The brain is an incredibly greedy organ, consuming a disproportionate amount of the body's energy. When that energy is scarce, higher cognitive functions are the first to be compromised. Furthermore, the very building blocks of our thoughts and emotions, neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, are synthesized from amino acids found in food. A restricted diet can lead to a depleted supply. This can alter mood, disrupt focus, and again degrade the brain's ability to process reality in a stable, consistent way. The world can begin to feel unreal, dreamlike, and intensely significant. Add to this the profound effects of fatigue and sleep deprivation. Tending a flock is a relentless around-the-clock responsibility. Sleep is fragmented, light, and constantly interrupted by the need to watch for predators or guide the animals to new pasture. Chronic sleep deprivation is one of the most powerful tools known for inducing altered states of consciousness. It disrupts the delicate dance between REM and NREM sleep, the cycles that are essential for consolidating memory and resetting the brain's emotional equilibrium. When this process is broken, the boundaries between states of consciousness begin to dissolve. The waking world can take on the bizarre, symbolic, and emotionally charged quality of a dream. Microsleeps, brief, involuntary episodes of sleep lasting only a few seconds, can intrude upon wakefulness, bringing with them fleeting fragments of dream imagery and sound. One can find oneself in a liminal state, not truly awake and not fully asleep, a state where a voice heard in a dream fragment can seamlessly blend with the sound of a crackling fire. And then, perhaps most powerful of all, is the effect of prolonged isolation and sensory deprivation. For days, weeks on end, the only sounds might be the wind, the flock, and the shepherd's own thoughts. The human mind is a social organ. It craves interaction and stimulus. When it is deprived of these things, it begins to create them for itself. This is a well-documented phenomenon. People in solitary confinement, explorers on long solo voyages, mystics in silent retreats, they all report a similar trajectory. The mind, starved of external input, turns inward and begins to project its own contents onto the world. The internal monologue becomes louder, more insistent. Memories can take on the quality of present-tense experiences, and in the profound silence of the desert, the brain, desperate for the sound of another voice, may simply create one from the raw material available to it. The threshold for auditory pareidolia plummets. The mind is so primed, so ready to hear a voice, that the slightest suggestion in the random noise of the environment is enough to trigger a full-blown perceptual event. So we have this convergence, this perfect storm. We have a dramatic and unusual external stimulus, a beautiful, fragrant, and audibly complex fire that does not consume. We have a brain that is evolutionarily hardwired to find patterns, especially human voices, in ambiguous noise, and we have an internal state, dehydrated, malnourished, sleep-deprived, and profoundly isolated, that dramatically enhances this tendency, lowering the threshold between imagination and perception. The shepherd is not just an observer of the event, their own neurology is an active and essential participant. The voice is not necessarily out there in the fire, it is being assembled, rendered in real time, at the intersection of the external world and the internal landscape of a mind under immense stress. But even this is not the full picture. We must also consider the cultural software running on that neurological hardware. The brain interprets sensory data based on its library of past experiences, its beliefs, and its expectations. This is known as top-down processing. What we perceive is not just a function of what our senses take in from the bottom up, it is profoundly shaped by what our mind expects to perceive from the top down. And a shepherd in the ancient Near East lived in a world saturated with a particular set of expectations. This was not a culture that saw the world through a modern, secular, mechanistic lens. The world was understood to be a place of deep and constant interaction between the mortal and the divine. The gods or God were not distant, abstract beings. They were active agents in the world. They spoke, and they spoke through the language of the natural world. They spoke in dreams and in visions. They spoke through the flight of birds, the shape of clouds, and the entrails of sacrificed animals. And most certainly they spoke through elemental forces like wind and water and fire. The idea that a divine being might communicate through a voice from a fire would not have been a strange or terrifying violation of the laws of nature. On the contrary, it would have been perfectly in keeping with the deepest assumptions about how the cosmos worked. The cultural context provided a powerful, pre-existing template for the experience. The shepherd was not just a person, They were a person living within a specific story about the world. When their stressed and pattern-seeking brain began to assemble a voice-like pattern from the sounds of the fire and wind, there was a ready-made, culturally endorsed explanation for what it was. It was the voice of the divine. This cultural priming is not a small thing. It is a powerful force in shaping perception. Imagine two people listening to the same piece of auditory static. You tell the first person that it's just noise from a broken radio. You tell the second person that it's a recording rumored to contain a ghostly message. The second person is vastly more likely to perceive a voice because you have primed their brain to expect one. Their top-down processing is actively searching for that specific pattern. For the desert shepherd, their entire culture was a form of priming. It created an intense expectation, a readiness to interpret an anomalous natural event, not as a curiosity of physics, but as an act of communication. This convergence of a unique external stimulus, a compromised and hypersensitive neurological state, and a powerful cultural predisposition creates a compelling and entirely naturalistic framework for understanding such a profound experience. It does not require us to dismiss the story as a simple fabrication, nor does it require us to abandon a scientific understanding of the world. Instead, it invites us to see the immense and mysterious power of the human brain itself. It suggests that a revelatory experience is not necessarily an event where the laws of physics are suspended, but perhaps an event where the ordinary laws of neurology, under extraordinary circumstances, produce an extraordinary result. The miracle is not that a bush spoke. The miracle is that a human mind is capable of hearing a voice in the fire, and in doing so, constructing a moment of world-altering meaning. And here, we must tread carefully and respectfully into one final area of inquiry. It is a possibility, not a certainty, but one that is grounded in the tangible reality of the land itself. We must consider the ethnobotany of the Sinai Peninsula. The desert is not a barren wasteland. It is a complex ecosystem, home to a vast and powerful pharmacopoeia of plants that have evolved to survive in the harshest of conditions, and many of the chemical compounds these plants produce to deter predators or attract pollinators can have profound and unexpected effects on the human brain. Throughout the Near East, and specifically in the regions of the Sinai and surrounding lands, grow several plants known to contain potent psychoactive alkaloids. One of the most notable is Paganum harmala, or Syrian rue. Its seeds contain harmala alkaloids, which are powerful monoamine oxidase inhibitors, or MAOIs. To the brain, this chemical acts like a master switch for certain neurotransmitters. Our brains have a cleanup crew, an enzyme called monoamine oxidase that breaks down and recycles neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine after they've delivered their message. It's what keeps the signaling clean and orderly. An MAOI, like the compounds in Syrian rue, essentially tells this cleanup crew to take a break. The result is that the brain's own naturally occurring neurotransmitters, especially serotonin, are not cleared away as quickly. They remain active in the synapses for longer, their signals amplified. This can induce a state of heightened sensory perception, intense emotionality, and a dreamlike visionary consciousness, even when fully awake. The leaves of this plant could easily have been mixed in with the fodder collected for the flock, or its seeds could have been accidentally consumed. Furthermore, the Sinai is home to several species of the acacia tree. The bark and leaves of many of these species, such as Acacia nilotica, are now known to contain significant quantities of dimethyltryptamine, or DMT. DMT is one of the most powerful psychedelic compounds known to science. What makes it so remarkable is that it is structurally very similar to our own neurotransmitter, serotonin. It is in effect a perfect chemical key that fits into the serotonin receptor locks in our brain, particularly the 5-HT2A receptor, which is densely populated in the brain regions associated with high-level cognition, sensory processing, and our sense of self. When DMT activates these receptors, it triggers a cascade of neurological activity that is almost indescribable. It can produce incredibly vivid, complex, and often auditory hallucinations, Users frequently report experiences of encountering seemingly autonomous entities, receiving complex information in the form of language or pure thought, and a profound dissolution of the boundary between the self and the external world. The experience is often described not as a hallucination, but as an encounter with a reality that is, in its own way, more real than ordinary waking consciousness. The fascinating part of this chemical story is the synergy between these two types of plants. DMT, on its own, is not orally active. If you were to eat the bark of an acacia tree, the DMT would be quickly broken down in your digestive system by that same enzyme we mentioned earlier, monoamine oxidase. It would be rendered inert before it could ever reach the brain. However, if it is consumed in the presence of an MAOI, like the harmala alkaloids from Syrian rue, that enzyme is inhibited. The chemical gateway is opened. The DMT is protected on its journey through the body, allowing it to cross the blood-brain barrier and produce its full, profound effects. This combination, a DMT-containing plant and an MAOI-containing plant, is the basis for the sacred Amazonian brew, ayahuasca. It is a form of ancient neurochemical engineering. We are not suggesting a deliberate, ritualistic preparation. That is a far greater leap than is necessary. Think instead of the simple daily realities of a shepherd's life: animals grazing, collecting plants for fodder, or for a small fire. The leaves of an acacia and the leaves and seeds of a Syrian rue bush, two common desert plants, could easily be gathered together. They could be chewed on absent-mindedly to relieve thirst or hunger. Or perhaps most plausibly, they could have been part of the very bush that was burning. If our Dictamnus bush were growing intertwined with an acacia or a Syrian rue, a common enough occurrence in a desert ecosystem, the intense heat of the flash fire would have vaporized these alkaloids. The shepherd, standing close enveloped in the fragrant smoke, would have inhaled them. Inhalation is a highly efficient route of administration, delivering the compounds directly to the brain. In this scenario, we have all the other factors we have discussed: the isolation, the fatigue, the cultural expectation, and then we add a powerful pharmacological accelerant. The effect would be staggering. The visual anomaly of the fire would be the entry point into a profoundly altered state of consciousness. The natural pareidolia-inducing sounds of the fire and wind would be amplified and rendered with an unimaginable clarity and significance. The brain's tendency to create patterns would be supercharged, its ability to distinguish internal thought from external reality completely suspended. In such a state, the perception of a voice would not be a vague, whisper-on-the-wind experience. It would be a total, immersive, and utterly convincing reality. It would be a direct, undeniable communication. This is not to reduce a sacred story to a chemical reaction. It is to do the opposite. It is to stand in awe of the sheer complexity of the interaction between the world and ourselves. It is to recognize that the land itself, its geology, its chemistry, its botany, is not just a passive backdrop for human history. It is an active participant. The plants, the heat, the light, the wind, they all have a voice. They speak to us through the astonishingly complex and sensitive instrument of the human brain. The true wonder is not choosing between one explanation and another. It is not a choice between a psychological event, a neurological event, a cultural event, or a chemical event. The wonder lies in realizing that they are all happening at once. They are all facets of the same diamond. The experience of the voice from the flames is born in the crucible, where the external world of desert physics and botany meets the internal world of human neurology, psychology, and belief. The brain, under the influence of exhaustion and isolation, becomes a more sensitive receiver. The cultural stories provide the language and the framework for any message that might be received. The unique auditory signature of the flash fire provides the raw, static-filled signal, and perhaps, just perhaps, the smoke from the fire itself carries the key that unlocks the door to a different kind of perception. The result is a moment of pure revelation, a moment where the self, the world, and the divine seem to collapse into a single point of overwhelming meaning. It is a testament not to the suspension of natural law, but to its most profound and intricate expression. The voice that speaks from the fire is the voice of the cosmos, but it is translated into human language by the miraculous, mysterious, and deeply sensitive instrument of the human mind. The real burning bush is not just the plant in the desert, it is the entire network of connections, physical, biological, and cultural, that allows such a moment to be born. It is a perfect, terrifying, and beautiful confluence of everything it means to be a conscious being in a complex and vibrant world. And in that there is a mystery as deep and as resonant as any ever told. Chapter 6. The Unconsumed Icon, Symbolism, Theology, and Legacy in Human Culture. And it is this instrument, the human mind, that takes the raw data of the senses, the light, the heat, the strange persistence of green leaves in a halo of fire, and begins its most profound work, the work of making meaning. A biological event, however rare or startling, is a fleeting thing. It happens, and then it is over. The molecules of gas are released, the energy dissipates, the light fades. But an idea, an image that lodges itself in the collective consciousness of a people, is a different kind of entity altogether. It is not bound by the laws of thermodynamics or the half-life of a chemical compound. An idea can burn for millennia, and far from being consumed, it can grow brighter, warmer, and more complex with every generation that reflects upon it. The burning bush of the Sinai Peninsula, the Rubus sanctus or the acacia, or perhaps even the Dictamnus with its ephemeral flame, ceases to be merely a plant. It becomes a vessel. It is transformed from a botanical curiosity into a cornerstone of theology, a symbol so potent that its light radiates out through history, illuminating the art, philosophy, and self-understanding of entire civilizations. We step back now from the desert sand and the chemistry of volatile oils, and we enter a different kind of ecosystem, the ecosystem of human belief. Here, we trace the journey of an image. We watch as it is carefully lifted from the soil of a singular event and replanted in the fertile ground of sacred text. Within the narrative of the book of Exodus, the burning bush is the setting for the most pivotal moment in the formation of a people. It is the divine appointment, the call to action for a reluctant prophet. But its function quickly transcends that of a mere theatrical backdrop. It becomes the primary symbol of the very message being delivered. The first and most enduring interpretation, the one that becomes woven into the very fabric of Judaism, is that of survival. The bush is Israel. The fire which rages and surrounds it, which licks at every leaf and branch, is everything that seeks to destroy it. It is the slavery in Egypt, the wandering in the desert, the might of the Assyrian and Babylonian empires, the crushing heel of Rome, the diaspora, the pogroms, the ghettos, the relentless pressure of assimilation, and the unspeakable industrial horror of the Holocaust. The fire is the endless trial of history, and yet the central miraculous fact remains: the bush is not consumed, it endures, it remains itself, green and alive, within the very heart of the flames. This is not a metaphor for invincibility or for a people who are not scarred by the flames. The text does not say the fire does not touch the bush, it says it does not consume it. The heat is felt, the danger is real, the trial is agonizing, but the core identity, the life within, persists. It's a symbol of profound resilience, a quiet and stubborn refusal to be annihilated. This interpretation is not just a later gloss, it feels embedded in the very structure of the moment. It is at this moment, from within this very fire, that God reveals a new name, Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh, a Hebrew phrase of sublime ambiguity, often translated as, I am that I am, or I will be what I will be. It is a name that speaks of pure existence, of a presence that is not contingent on circumstance. It is the ultimate statement of being. And for a people who would spend so much of their history defined by exile and statelessness, this divine name, revealed from a symbol of indestructible life, became a promise. It suggested that their existence too was not contingent on possessing land or power, but on a covenant, an inner fire that could not be extinguished by the world's flames. The symbol of the unconsumed bush became a kind of spiritual constitution, a visual reminder that to be Jewish was to endure the fire and to remain, somehow, miraculously, alive. It is an image that would have resonated in the heart of a captive in Babylon, just as powerfully as it would in the heart of a survivor in a displaced persons camp in 1945. The fire changes, but the miracle of the unconsumed bush remains a constant source of strength. As the stream of Abrahamic tradition branched and flowed into new landscapes, this potent symbol was carried along, its seeds ready to take root in new theological soil. Within Christianity, the burning bush was not discarded, but reinterpreted, seen through a new lens. The early church fathers, thinkers like Gregory of Nyssa and Cyril of Alexandria, looked at this Old Testament miracle and saw in it a prefiguration, a divine foreshadowing of the central mystery of their own faith, the Incarnation. The paradox of the bush, a fragile, earthly plant containing an uncontainable fire without being destroyed, became the perfect metaphor for the paradox of Jesus Christ. In their theology, Jesus was both fully human and fully divine. The bush represented his mortal, human nature, born of the earth, fragile and finite. The fire was the essence of God, the divine Logos, infinite, eternal, and all-powerful. The miracle of the Incarnation, for them, was that the divine could dwell fully within the human without annihilating it. Just as the fire inhabited the bush, the Godhead inhabited the man, Jesus of Nazareth. It was a union, not a consumption. The fire did not turn the bush to ash. Divinity did not erase humanity. It was a way of explaining the inexplicable, of giving visual form to a theological concept that stretched the very limits of language and logic. The story of Moses at Horeb was now seen as a divine rehearsal for the story of God at Bethlehem. And this interpretation branched again, giving rise to another, equally powerful symbolic reading, one that found a particular home in the Eastern Orthodox tradition. If the bush was the vessel that held the divine fire, who was the ultimate human vessel that held the divine? For many, the answer was Mary, the mother of Jesus. She became the Theotokos, the God-bearer. She was the human vessel who carried the fire of divinity in her womb for 9 months and was not consumed. She was the living embodiment of the burning bush. This imagery is profound and beautiful. It elevates the humble, earthy, biological reality of a woman's body to the site of a divine miracle. The bush, a simple desert shrub, and Mary, a young woman from a provincial town, are joined in this symbolic understanding. Both are chosen for their humility, and both become the stage for a paradoxical union of the finite and the infinite. In Eastern Orthodox iconography, this connection is made explicit. Icons of Mary are often called the unburnt bush, and she is sometimes depicted sitting at the center of a star-like pattern of flames, serene and untouched, the ultimate symbol of a human being so filled with divine grace that she can contain God himself without being destroyed. The symbol that began as a promise of national survival now also became a deeply personal and intimate metaphor for how the sacred can inhabit the profane, how grace can fill a human soul without burning it away. The journey of the symbol doesn't end there. It flows into the third great Abrahamic faith, Islam. In the Quran, the story of the prophet Musa, or Moses, is told with great reverence. The event at the mountain, which is called Tur, is a foundational moment. The narrative is strikingly similar. Musa sees a fire. He approaches it, and a voice calls out to him from a tree in a sacred valley. The voice declares, "O Moses, verily I am God, the Lord of the worlds." Here the emphasis is perhaps less on the visual paradox of the unconsumed plant, and more on the sanctity of the place and the directness of the divine communication. The fire is the signal, the beacon that draws the prophet to the holy ground. The tree is the conduit, the physical object from which the formless, placeless voice of God chooses to speak into our world. The event is a profound theophany, a manifestation of God that establishes Musa's prophecy and sets in motion the liberation of his people. While Islamic art, being largely an iconic, does not develop the rich visual tradition of depicting the burning bush as seen in Judaism and Christianity, the spiritual significance of the event is immense. It is a moment of pure divine initiation, where the veil between heaven and earth is made thin, and a mortal man is spoken to directly by his Creator from a source of light and fire. The tree, the fire, and the voice combine to sanctify the ground, making it a blessed spot, a place where the geography of earth touches the geography of heaven. And so this image, born in a desert, nurtured in scripture, and elaborated in theology, spills out into the broader culture of the world. For centuries, it became a subject for artists, a challenge to their skills. How do you paint a fire that gives light but does not destroy? How do you capture a paradox on canvas or in stained glass? In medieval illuminated manuscripts, monks would paint the scene with painstaking detail, often using real gold leaf for the flames, so that the image itself would seem to emanate a holy light from the page. In the great cathedrals of Europe, the story is told in the deep blues and reds of stained glass windows, light itself passing through the image of divine light. Renaissance painters like Dierich Bautz depicted a thoughtful, reverent Moses, shielding his eyes not just from a physical brightness, but from the sheer weight of the revelation. You can see the artist's struggle and fascination. Some paint the flames as a gentle halo, others as a roaring inferno, yet in every successful depiction, the leaves of the bush remain defiantly, impossibly green. The symbol resonated beyond the visual arts. It became a metaphor in literature and philosophy for any encounter with a truth that is both terrifying and illuminating. It could represent the burning passion of artistic inspiration, a creative fire that fuels the artist without destroying them. It could be the moment of scientific discovery, when a glimpse into the raw, powerful machinery of the universe is both awe-inspiring and humbling. It could be the inner turmoil of a spiritual crisis, the feeling of being tested by a fire that purifies rather than consumes. The burning bush became a universal symbol for any experience where ordinary reality is momentarily suspended, and one comes into contact with something overwhelming, powerful, and utterly other. It is the moment the poet Rilke describes as the terrible angel, an encounter with a beauty so intense it borders on the terrifying. What is it about this specific image that gives it such enduring power? Perhaps it is because it speaks to a fundamental human experience. We all know the consuming fire. We know grief and loss and fear and failure. We know the fires that threaten to turn our lives to ash. And we also know the quiet, stubborn, green persistence of life. We know the resilience that can be found in the human spirit, the part of us that, even after being scorched by tragedy, can put forth a new leaf. The burning bush is a story of hope, told in the language of physics and botany. It suggests that there can be a power greater than the fire of destruction. Whether one calls that power God, or life, or grace, or resilience, the symbol points to the same truth, that it is possible to pass through the flames and not be consumed. It is also a symbol of perfect attention. Moses is drawn to the bush, not because it is on fire. A fire in the desert is not necessarily a rare sight, but because it is a paradox. It is a break in the expected pattern of reality. He turns aside to look. He pays attention. And it is only when he gives his full, undivided attention to this natural anomaly that the divine voice speaks. The story is a profound lesson in the art of seeing. It suggests that moments of revelation are not always grand, earth-shaking cataclysms. Sometimes they are quiet paradoxes, small impossibilities in the fabric of the everyday. They are available only to those who have the patience and the stillness of mind to truly look at the world around them, to notice the detail that is out of place, the phenomenon that defies easy explanation. The voice of the divine, the story implies, does not shout from the heavens, it whispers from the heart of a strange and beautiful anomaly, waiting for a curious soul to draw near. In this sense, the legacy of the burning bush is an invitation. It is an invitation to see the world not as a collection of mundane, explainable objects, but as a place pregnant with possibility, a place where the miraculous might be hidden in plain sight, disguised as a common desert shrub. It bridges the gap between the world of faith and the world of natural observation. The scientist and the mystic can both stand before this image and find something true. The scientist sees a fascinating chemical reaction, a marvel of evolutionary adaptation, a testament to the unexpected and bizarre ingenuity of the natural world. The mystic sees a symbol of divine presence, a metaphor for spiritual endurance, a testament to a God who chooses to reveal himself in the humble and the unexpected. And perhaps, just perhaps, they are both looking at the same thing. They are both looking at a universe that is far stranger, more beautiful, and more mysterious than our categories can contain. The image of the unconsumed bush has become a kind of cultural DNA, passed down through generations, replicating itself in sermons, poems, paintings, and the quiet architecture of individual belief. It is a testament to the power of a single resonant image to shape human thought. It shows us how the human mind, that remarkable instrument, can take a fleeting moment of sensory input, light, heat, color, and form, and transform it into a story that can provide comfort in suffering, a language for the ineffable, and a lens through which to view the deepest questions of existence. The real fire that may have burned for a few moments on a hillside in the Sinai 3,000 years ago has long since gone out. But the symbolic fire it ignited in the human imagination continues to burn, a gentle and unconsuming light that still guides, still inspires, and still speaks to the part of us that longs for a world where even in the heart of the fire, life can and does endure. And in that shared story, in that persistent image, we find a connection not just to a distant past, but to each other, to the long, unbroken chain of human beings who have looked at the trials of their own lives and have taken comfort in the ancient promise of a bush that burns but is never ever consumed.